Venezuela has a bias towards the BRICS nations, nationals, businesses, and governments? Well, today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
It's well known that Venezuela is poised to join the BRICS nations maybe by the end of the year or years to come. Venezuela is one of the members of the nations that already submitted their formal application to the BRICS nations group, and with 20 other nations, but also we have to take into account that Venezuela has excellent diplomatic relationship with most of the BRICS nations. Actually, it's either good or great, depending on the case. We can review a little bit further, a little bit later. But the main point is that Venezuela, of course, is on this geopolitics sphere that is a little bit alone, outside of the West, and has better relationship with, let's say, these other League of Nations that are, around the BRICS nations, the already members, the five founding members: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but also has good diplomatic relationship with the other 5 new members, and it has very good diplomatic relationship with the other 20 plus applicants that are poised to join the BRICS nations on years to come. Now, I explained many times here on this platform, I'm going to do it yet again, is that if you are trying to accomplish something in Venezuela regarding business, residency, whatever may be the case, is that depending on your passport, is going to make it easier or harder to submit any application regarding residency, business, and so on. So depending on your nationality, it's going to be easier to get things done within Venezuela. And of course, there are some other attributes, some other characteristics from each personal profile that will make easier or harder to get things done here in the country. But having a passport that is BRICS friendly is going to make everything easier within the country. Now, if you're watching this from abroad and you have only a Western passport, that is not going to be a deal breaker here in the country, but also depends on which nationality you have. For instance, if you have an European Union passport, it's not going to be a deal breaker. Venezuela has kind of a good relationship with the European Union, of course, still Western nation, some issues and nuances going around, but I mean, if you're a citizen of one of these European nations, if you have one of these passports, is depending on which passport, it's going to be easier or harder. For instance, you can take the Mediterranean European Union passports, are going to be great in order to do things here in Venezuela. And also, if you are in Central Europe, can be a good passport as well within Venezuela. And right now, for instance, Venezuela has good diplomatic relationship with Poland, so a Polish passport might work here well in the country. However, the biggest issue regarding Western passports comes for US passports. First, they require a tourist visa in order to access the country. Meanwhile, if you have a, let's say, European Union passport or a British passport, you can enter the country without requiring a tourist visa. And afterwards, the paperwork is gonna get a little bit tricky if you come to the US. However, I have to say that if you put the work, if you go to the due diligence of getting things done in the country with a US passport, I'm seeing many cases that internationals that come from a Western nation, especially from the US, they just take care of business, their paperwork, and so on. And I know it's dreadful. There are a lot of frictions in order to accomplish so, but trust me, if you get things done, if you do the paperwork, and you can get everything accomplished regarding paperwork. And meanwhile, if you come with a more friendly passport here in the country, but you don't do the due diligence, and you don't put the effort, and you don't get the right information, you are gonna fail in your endeavor in Venezuela. But today we are gonna review how a BRICS nation passport can work in Venezuela, not only for the 5 initial founding members of the BRICS group, but also the other 5 members that already submitted their applications and right now are officially BRICS nations members. I'm not going to mention today the other 20 plus applicant nations that are poised to join the BRICS group in the near future. First, I want to start with Argentina, that it was the 6th new member of the BRICS nations. However, since Javier Milei was elected as the president of Argentina, he declined joining the BRICS group because his geopolitics strategy for the rest of the world involves being friends with the US, Israel, and right now I think the European Union. But he's more of Western-centric compared to these, let's say, Eastern allies, put it on that context. Argentina, I mentioned when they have a Peronist president, they are way more friendly towards the Venezuelan government and the diplomatic relationships are better. However, right now, Milei is quite the opposite, and he has terrible diplomatic relationships with Venezuela, and I'm not going to discuss why, but it is what it is. And the other thing that happens, it was a diplomatic issue last year with a Venezuelan government-owned aircraft that was detained in Argentina in the airport of Buenos Aires. And afterwards, this aircraft was seized by the US government and it was completely dismantled. And the Venezuelan government is very, very, very upset. And right now, the Venezuelan government just prohibited using the Venezuelan airspace for Argentinian flights. And this is kind of an issue right now. So right now, Argentina might not be the best passport in order to get things done here in the country. I'm talking on the diplomatic relationship level and bureaucratic levels. With the people, it's the average Venezuelan is going to be a completely different story. But right now, if you have an Argentinian passport, or let's say you are a Western living in Argentina, if you want to accomplish something within the country, it's going to be a little bit harder. Having said that, I have to say right now, and I hope this status quo maintains, is that if you come from Argentina, you have an Argentinian passport, you can travel without visa restriction to Venezuela. Same thing by Venezuelan citizens, they can travel to Argentina and without requiring a visa. I hope that status quo maintains. Remember that Venezuela also has a reciprocity policy regarding internationals. So it's not exactly the case, but in most nations that require a tourist visa for Venezuelan nationals, the Venezuelan government is requiring a visa for those citizens as well. So let's start with Brazil. Brazil, of course, is the largest country regarding population in Latin America, one of the biggest economies in the world. And the current president is Ignacio Lula da Silva, that is actually a very good friend with the Venezuelan government. And what ends up happening is that the diplomatic relationship is quite good. A little bit frictions because Brazil is kind of a mediator in many issues regarding Latin America. However, it has a very good relationship with the Venezuelan government. Also, you have to take into account that Brazil has a very particular policy, international policy, regarding geopolitics and so on. And regarding migration, is that Brazil has the view of applying reciprocity policies, and they don't reward the status of each nation. Okay, that's basically the policy of most nations around the world, rewarding the countries with higher status and punishing the citizens of countries with least status. Countries like, Sub-Saharan Africa, and for our countries in Latin America and Southeast Asia, and so on. Very good. Brazil has a reciprocity policy. It doesn't matter the socioeconomic status of each nation. It matters how their nationals are treated elsewhere. For instance, the United States. The United States requires visa for most nations all over the world, except for a handful of nations in Western Europe and so on. Most Latin American nations, just except Chile, require a visa in order to travel to the United States. It's very hard to get such visa for a Latin American citizen. It's a dreadful process. And most, if you're watching this from the US, you don't know this, but it's very, very, very difficult and tricky. You have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get a tourist visa in order to enter the United States, especially if you are a Latino. Well, Brazil decided, and this is a policy that has been going on since many years. Brazil has this policy of treating equally United States citizens when they travel to Brazil. For instance, I've been in Brazil a handful of times, and what happened is during the migration process on a big Brazilian airport, it's very, very easy. It's quick like that. I remember the first time I arrived to the airport in Sao Paulo, and a huge line. And it was very easy. Everyone, it was very easy, unlike the United States. I've been in a bunch of major U.S. airports, and the process is dreadful after 9/11 and that kind of stuff. Okay. Except in Brazil, the only people that have an issue, go to an extra security checks and drug checks and so on, are American citizens, because that's how Brazilians are treated when they go to the United States. And same thing with Spain. Very good. So what Brazil does is that, this is since many years, they require a tourist visa for U.S. citizens in order to travel to Brazil as well, because that's the way Brazilians are treated by U.S. authorities. Now, that changed during the Jair Bolsonaro administration in Brazil. That was ended just last year, and he just removed the requirement for visa applications for Americans in order to increase American tourism in Brazil. But when Lula da Silva arrived yet again in the country, they just apply yet again the visa restriction for U.S. citizens. Or now I believe it's easier because you can do it online instead of going to an embassy. And also it was applied to other Western nations that require visa for Brazilian citizens. Now, going back to Venezuela, how the relationships are. Well, if you're a Brazilian citizen, you can enter the country fairly easy. It's going to be easier to get a residency, an application when you are in the country. You can apply. It's going to be easier running your errands. I'm talking the bureaucratic errands, not among the people and the private sector, but Brazilians, actually, Venezuelans and Brazilians, I'm talking on the street level, the citizens of each nation, they get along pretty fine. I met hundreds and hundreds of Brazilian people, never had an issue with them. Shout out to you. Very fun people to hang out with. Also easy, probably the easiest people to deal with are Brazilians, so very good for you guys. And regarding the relationship and getting things done in the country, also on the diplomatic level, very good. So Brazilians basically have a green light to getting things done here in Venezuela. Number two, let's go with Russia. Russia, first, great diplomatic relationship between Venezuela and the Russian Federation. We know Maduro, the Venezuelan president, has a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. You can take it as you want to take it, but it is what it is. Also, the Russian Chancellor, the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has been a bunch of times here in the country. Actually, just recently, a few weeks ago, he visited Caracas yet again. Also, a lot of travel from Russian nationals to Venezuela, especially to Margarita Island. I mentioned this a bunch of times. And also some investments from Russian companies, mostly oil companies, here in the country. So if you come from Russia, first, you don't need to apply a visa application. You can travel freely. Venezuelans can also travel freely to Russia, to the Russian Federation. A direct flight between Caracas and Moscow. Also charter flights between Russian seas cities to Caracas and then to Margarita Island. So great relationship indeed. So if you have a Russian passport, and I know also there is a lot of restrictions worldwide for Russian citizens due to the special military operation in Ukraine. But actually Venezuela is one of the few destinations that they can travel freely around the world. So if you have a Russian passport, very good in order to get things done here in Venezuela. So number 3, we have India. India is different, probably is the nation that Venezuela has the least well geopolitical relationship, but it's not like Venezuela and India have bigger issues. Actually, diplomatic wise, they have great relationships. It's not as close as other members within the BRICS group. And also India is probably the BRICS nation that has most diplomatic relationship with the Western nations, the G7 nations, and so on. Very good. India, the people from India, this is works differently because they are required in order to apply for a tourist visa in order to visit the country. Same thing with Venezuelans that want to visit India. Getting things done for Hindu citizens is not as difficult. The other thing is, since India is a big country, you have to travel the only consulate that Venezuela has in India. But afterwards, if you're here in the country, it's not going to be great issues. If you can prove that you have your profile is fit in order to visit Venezuela, you're going to be pretty much fine. Also, some important investments, Indian investments here in Venezuela from car manufacturers, oil, of course, and all the pharmaceuticals. We have a bunch of pharmaceuticals from India as well. So the relationship with India is kind of okay. Probably not the best within the BRICS group, but it's pretty fine. And is poised to improve on years to come. Now let's go with China. The diplomatic relationship with China is very good. It was a little bit cold in the past 4 or 5 years since China always has been very close to the Venezuelan government during the Chavismo, with first Hugo Chavez and now with Maduro. The issue with China is that China invested a lot in Venezuela, in different projects and so on. And what happened is Venezuela, I'm talking Venezuelan government, didn't fulfill 100% those agreements, mostly on the infrastructure and that kind of stuff. But Venezuela has a very large foreign debt, mostly to China. But the Venezuelan government has been serving this debt. I mean, not as efficiently as the Chinese government would want, but they actually have been serving the debt. And right now, the outstanding debt is way lower than initially and on a reasonable interest rate, so that debt, it will be fulfilled with not so much issues as previously thought. China has invested here from oil projects, infrastructure, supplies, car manufacturers. We have a bunch of Chinese car manufacturers here in the country. Also supplies from everything. And also we have a very important cohort of the population that those are Chinese descendants as well. Now, regarding the relationship among average people from Venezuela and China, and also private businesses, is actually quite okay. The only issue is, in order to travel to Venezuela as a Chinese citizen, you need to apply for a visa that for Chinese people is not going to be as difficult to get if you fit certain profile. And also for Venezuelan citizens that they want to travel to China, also not difficult. You just have to go to Caracas, to the Chinese embassy. If you fit certain profile, you're going to get your visa as well. It's not going to be that kind of an issue, that big of an issue. Also, there is a lot of Venezuelans that travel to China and they have imports from China and they are doing very well. I'm talking private incentives, private endeavors of Venezuelans that import a lot of goods from China, and they are doing pretty okay. So if you have a Chinese passport, doing business in Venezuela actually would be great with your particular passport. Let's go with South Africa, the last founding BRICS group member. The diplomatic relationship is not as close, but it's great. so it's not going to be an issue over there. Regarding citizens, the travel is not as great, but pretty much doable. There is not as much South African presence within Venezuela, but if it increases, it's not going to be a big deal. If you come here as a private individual, going to be pretty decent, you're going to be treated pretty fine. Getting the paperwork is not going to be as difficult. So if you have a passport from South Africa, not going to be a big of an issue visiting Venezuela. Now, the 5 new members that are now joining the BRICS group, let's start by Saudi Arabia. This is a relationship with the Saudis. Now, regarding individuals, it's not as easy to get a tourist visa in order to visit Saudi, but Venezuelans with certain profile surely can do so. I have a cousin that visited Riyadh just last year, I believe. Everything cool, everything fine. Also, regarding diplomatic-wise, pretty good, not a big issue. And also remember, both are OPEC members, founding OPEC members, so they have certain relationship not only with the BRICS group, but also with OPEC meetings. So if you're a Saudi citizen that wants to visit Venezuela or do some business, it's not going to be major diplomatic issue. Also, Iran, excellent diplomatic relationship. I'm not going to get into the details and nuances, but if you have an Iranian passport, pretty good. Come here, visit, invest. There's a lot of Iranian investing here in Venezuela. Also, we have some Iranian cars here. The other members are Egypt. The relationship is kind of okay, not as easy. You need travel document, a visa in order to visit. If you're an Egyptian citizen, you're gonna be fine. Also, forgetting the other one, Ethiopia, diplomatic relationship, okay. Visiting is not as great. I never met an Ethiopian here in Venezuela, but if you come here, if you go to the paperwork, not gonna be big of an issue. And lastly, we have the United Arab Emirates, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, basically. And in case you don't know the Emirates, the diplomatic relationship actually not as great as compared to Iran, but also to OPEC members. Diplomatic relationship pretty decent, pretty okay. The Venezuelan vice president visited the Emirates last year, I believe, and recently business delegate from the Venezuelan government had a meeting with Emirates authorities, so that case pretty much fine. If you're an Emirates citizen, you can come here without a hiccup and get everything done. Emirates investing here in Venezuela are they are not great because they haven't been done yet, but if you want to be a pioneer in that, just go ahead. Same thing with Venezuelans. Actually, a handful of Venezuelans live on the United Arab Emirates, mostly thanks to the oil industry. And actually, I have a friend who lives in Abu Dhabi, who was a college teacher and now doing pretty well over there in Abu Dhabi. So that will resume the relationship between Venezuela and the BRICS members. Now, if you don't have a passport from BRIC nation, it's not going to be a deal breaker. Depending on your particular profile, you can get things done. If you do have a BRIC nation passport, things are going to be better for you regarding bureaucracy, diplomacy, and so on. And on the street level, you're going to be pretty much fine.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.